Strength in Cairo, the podcast. This is season 3, episode 4, from my understanding. We've had a pretty busy year, but I'm excited to finally get to our 4th episode. Lucky for us, very lucky to have Alan English. Alan is a exercise physiologist like myself, so I'm really excited. Hey, it's nice to have a bloody EP on the podcast. Represent the EPs because we got 2 Kairos here. And we're going to go and talk about, all things rehab and movement and exercise. So I'm really excited for this episode. Alan has a wealth of knowledge. As always, I'll introduce co-host, so Dr. Stephen Redmond, but it's actually Redmond, but I say Redmond. That's fine. So welcome to your own podcast, Dr. Stephen.
Thank you.
You will recognize him, Dr. Luke Gishard down there on the right corner. He is now joining us as a co-host of the podcast. So this is his first Strength in Cairo as a co-host and not a guest. So welcome to your own podcast, Dr. Luke.
Good to be back, man. Always enjoy.
So hey, once again, thanks for coming on the podcast, Alan. It's our privilege and our pleasure to have you on.
No, thanks for having me. It's definitely a privilege of mine, and I know we've been chatting for quite a while now. I'm with Luke and Steve, and it's just been great to get the invite and come along and have a chat and discuss all things rehabilitation and strength.
Definitely. Part of the topic of what we're going to talk about is that spectrum of chiropractic care, exercise physiology, rehab, how those things work in. A lot of people listening to this may not even fully understand what exercise physiology is. Before we get into legit and bullshit, just so that listeners have a little bit of an understanding of who you are, do you want to just give us a little bit of a brief rundown of who you are, what you do, what exercise physiology is for those that don't know?
Yeah, sure. I'm Alan, and thanks for a great introduction as well. I am a leprechaun. I'm from Dublin, Ireland, and I'm based here. I'm actually about the same height as a leprechaun, believe it or not, about 5'6". But I'm based here in Sydney, Australia now. I've been here almost 13 years. But exercise physiology is actually my second career. So my first career, I spent 12 and a half years working for eBay, big online marketplace company, and worked my way up in eBay. That's what got me transferred to Sydney. But in the background, I was always really, really keen on physiology, biology, strength and conditioning. I always loved my own training. I was very active as a child. My family were always very active, and I was just always very, very intrigued by the human body, sport performance. And even when I was in the corporate world, it wasn't really about kind of marketing books I was into. It was always science. So towards the end of my 5th year working here in Sydney, I decided to shift gears, transition out of that career, and then go back to uni and study exercise physiology and sports science.
So how long have you been practicing now?
I've been practicing 2.5 years, but during my time in undergrad studies, I actually started then as a PT in 2017. So all the way through uni, I had those qualifications where I was working with people, trying to get better with the communication skills and trying to just learn more about training methodologies. So practicing, I suppose, what we were learning in uni and getting that little bit more information than just the regular kind of PT courses that were out there. Well, a lot more. Yeah.
And any sport that you have played that you're passionate about or that you just enjoy or love to watch?
Yeah, my passions growing up were Gaelic football, hurling and soccer. And I'd also watch a little bit of rugby. I didn't go to a private school, so rugby wasn't on the agenda for the school. I went to Christian Brothers High School in Dublin, our secondary school. But the main sports for us was Gaelic football and hurling. That was the school was known for that. So I did get to play in our big stadium back in Dublin, and we had a couple of great teams and soccer teams through school, so really loved that. But probably around the age of 14 or 15, I started to really read more around how can I get bigger, how can I get stronger, what do I need to eat, and what do the athletes do? And I was just intrigued by it all, and that's kind of where the whole journey started, I think.
No, I can certainly relate. That's definitely how I kind of fell in love with anatomy and physiology was through lifting, was through powerlifting, the sport of powerlifting. I played rugby as well. Luke was obviously played a lot of rugby, was probably a lot better than I was, but it's very normal in New Zealand. Like you were saying, so you were saying you only have the opportunity to play rugby if you're in like a rich school. Is that kind of?
Yeah, it's
That's
not really
crazy.
It's
crazy.
It's not common back home really to get the opportunity to play that in your normal public schools. It might be a bit different now, but generally at that time it was definitely the more affluent private schools back in Dublin and Ireland.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Because you don't have a bad national team.
No, the national team are fantastic. Like I
Yeah.
mean, it's gone very competitive
Ireland's,
since the Aussies and the
yeah.
Kiwis have actually come down. The setup back home is ridiculous now. I mean, they've got the underage academies are fantastic. So they've
Hmm.
really taken the youth in now from the root level.
Irish rugby is really good. It's definitely taking a step forward for sure. They're giving the Kiwis a run for their money.
I think Michael Cheika was the first person that kind of came down and started really changing things at Leinster. And then you have Schmidt came down,
Yeah,
changed
Schmidt,
things
Joe
up,
Schmidt.
and yeah, and like Munster were one of the first regions to win the European Cup, and then everyone else was like, "Hold on a sec, what's going on there?"
Yeah. And you got
So
some good fighters as well, don't you?
yeah, great fighters. I mean, we've got the notorious Conor McGregor, love or hate him or whatever you want to say, but yeah.
He's a
But
legend.
But he is a bit of a legend, but we've had some great boxers in the past as well, like Barry McGuigan,
Yeah.
featherweight champion. We've had a few others. We've Michael McCullough.
Mm.
We've had a good few Olympic champions as well, which is good. Yeah. So for a small little nation, we're very, very sporty, and we've done quite well for ourselves.
Yeah, it's funny in New Zealand, like, and Luke obviously knows this as well. The rugby piece is so popular that it's just so common to grow up playing it, and even when they're like my son who's like 5, 6 now, but the first year at school 5, they have primary school rugby teams, super cheap, super accessible, and the
Yeah.
kids are just learning the basic hand-eye coordination and just kind of learning how to kind of get into it, play touch and stuff like that. But then you've also got club, like legitimate clubs. And I started playing club from when I was 5. Like when I started like with bare feet, I didn't start at school. I went like straight to a club, which is not uncommon either for Kiwi boys. Yeah, it's pretty cool. We have this like culture around ruggers. When I talk to people in my generation, it's very common that they played rugby when they were younger. It's just kind of the thing we did.
My father was very like all my family were very active as well. You guys might be the same as well, but my dad, like in particular, he was a fantastic hurling player. He was
Like,
quite small but very strong,
yeah.
very agile. And I used to with my brother as well, but we'd go to all his training sessions. I mean, he played for Dublin at one stage and represented
Mm.
the county. And my grandfather comes from a county as well in Kilkenny that literally it's like a factory for good players. That's all they do in that county is they grow up with a
Nice.
wooden hurl in their hand, and
Yeah.
that's it. But that was passed down through the family. But like I used to just love watching Dad play because he was able to swivel, pivot, catch a high ball, catch a low ball, and he was the free taker on the team. And I just thought to myself, wow, he's a bit of a hero, this fella. Like, what's going on? How is he able to,
Yeah. That's
be
cool.
so fast and agile? And that's, I think it took on from there. Really, I think it was like, I want to be a bit like that when I
Yeah.
get older and start playing.
It's in the blood. It's
Yeah,
genetic.
yeah, yeah.
You're a genetic athlete. As it is a custom here on the Strength and Chiro podcast, today is the Strength Chiro and the EP podcast. But we're going to get into legit or bullshit. So as always, I'm sure you've seen the clips before. I'm going to ask a question or more of a statement, and what I'm looking from you is a legit or a bullshit. It needs to be fast, rapid. The faster, the better. A quick game is a good game, as we say. The key is no ums, no ahs, no thinking, no context. This is the point. It's meant to be just a bit fun. So chill out on social media. Don't give Alan too much of a hard time. Are you ready?
I'm ready. Let's
Do
go.
you understand the game?
We do.
Okay, legit or bullshit? Massage guns for musculoskeletal rehab.
Bullshit.
Icing for injuries.
Bullshit.
Technique always matters.
Legit.
Static stretching to improve sports performance.
Bullshit.
Static stretching to warm up.
On its own, bullshit.
Static stretching for specific rehabilitative purposes.
Legit.
The biopsychosocial model.
Ah, legit.
Loaded spinal flexion is more efficient than neutral under load.
Bullshit.
TENS or electric stim machines for rehab.
Legit.
Nerve glides for pain reduction.
Legit.
Butt wink in the squat.
Legit.
Walking as one's chosen exercise is enough to achieve optimal health.
Bullshit.
Squatting on plates if you lack dorsiflexion.
Legit.
That's it. Done. Well done. How was it?
That wasn't too bad. There was one in there though. I was thinking, ooh,
Which one?
the butt wink and the squat is definitely It's definitely, I wouldn't say like it's legit, it happens, but would I recommend it or condone? No,
Well, yeah, fair enough.
right?
I
But
agree. I think I agree with most things. I think I agree with everything you said there. Yeah. The only thing I don't agree on is using plates to squat on. Like man, that drives me nuts. I just see, like, I understand the reasoning for it, but I think it's so basic, dangerous, juvenile implementation to band-aid a legitimate mobility restriction that could be dealt with properly, but people just squat on plates. I'm just like, ah.
I like to, I definitely, I don't use them as an early stage exercise recommendation. Where
Mm,
I actually work on the person's ankle mobility restrictions first.
yeah.
When the person progresses through their training, it can be a nice little quad finisher if you have some,
Yeah.
or something like that.
I'd agree with
But,
that. Yep.
but definitely,
Again, context, right? Like it's
yeah,
yeah.
exactly. Context is it, but
Context.
definitely not for somebody that has, straight off the bat, pretty poor ankle mobility and are very restricted in the squat. But yeah,
I remember back in the day jamming, you would smash like you'd finish a superset with like leg extensions and then jump down and just body weight for failure, like with a couple of plates under your ankles or whatever.
Yep. Yeah,
So
it
yeah,
definitely is
I get what
a,
you're saying.
a good tool for that. I suppose the absolute load is going to be less as well. So that makes more sense as opposed to the potential risks you could have if you were squatting on plates and doing your main sets and reps.
oh yeah,
Do you
no,
know what I mean? Which is like you see. But I also recently on social media saw a clip where this person had ankle restrictions. They kind of like put him on a slant board, put a weight out in front of him, and they're like, there you go, he's fixed. You can load him now. And I'm like, all you did was just altered the biomechanics. There was no real change or no real even effort to change what was actually happening on a kind of biomechanical mobility level. And so I often find people do that. I know it's common. You hear people say, oh, it's a band-aid, but the dorsiflexion thing can be an issue. I also heard on social media the other day, this guy said having restricted dorsiflexion is responsible for 80% of lower body injuries, which is not true. It's disappointing because that type of statement is going to turn people off when the sentiment behind it, I can get on board that we need to clear the dorsiflexion, especially if we're doing anything with triple flexion or any type of athletic endeavor. But when you say stuff like that, which is potentially, or as we know, not true, it switches people off and then you kind of lose the value in what he's trying to say. And so I was like, oh, like, I definitely don't agree with that. But anyway, we'll get into, so it was cool to hear a little bit about yourself, a little bit about exercise physiology. Tell me, why did you, I mean, you could have, based upon what you told me about your story,
yes,
you really could have gone into, I mean, anything really. You could have been a great chiro, great physio, great osteo, any manual medicine type stuff, but you chose to pursue exercise physiology, which and is different in different countries, you know. So here in New Zealand and in Australia, it is a legitimate allied healthcare. In the States, it's a little bit more like an advanced trainer, if you will, from what I understand. But especially over here in Australia, I think in 2023 it was the second fastest growing
profession, yeah.
profession period. So it's very popular from what I understand in Canada, Australia, and New Zealand. It's getting even more well known in the UK. It's very well known in the US, but under a little bit different context from what I understand. So from you, why EP? Why exercise physiology?
Yeah, I got into exercise physiology obviously because the exercise intervention and the things just really, really interested me. But I love the science behind the implementation and what goes on physiologically when we administer exercise as the tool. Like it's a potent tool. We know that it's got so many benefits for our health, our mental health, physiologically, everything, metabolic health. We know the benefits. But the reason is because really I just love the whole area of strength training. I've trained strength training myself for years on end. And that was a real, I suppose, motivator behind it. I didn't really want to just do hands-on manual therapy. I wanted to kind of get into the weeds or get onto the floor with people and actually get them to move well, use strength training or exercise as the intervention and try and help them, make them knowledgeable and get them to walk away completely different person after treatment as opposed to just maybe coming back for weeks on end for a little rub here or massage there and hoping things would just go away. I just had a real, I suppose, passion for strength training, but also trying to understand biomechanically what is actually going on at that deep level and how do we fix it? And how do we get these people to a
Mm.
point where they can just walk away going, okay, wow, I think I can do this long term and maintain this. So that was the real motivation for it. And then obviously the scope of clients as well that exercise physiology can cover. So, I mean, lots of exercise physiologists are involved in a lot of different areas. So it could be
Mm.
musculoskeletal rehab like myself, strength training. We can work at professional, sporting clubs and the like, hospitals, clinics, and you can specialize in so many areas. So the opportunity for me as well in those, well, for as an EP coming out of uni, I just thought it was the avenue to go down.
Yeah, and as you said, exercise physiologists, they have many different roles across what would be the profession. From what you understand as a EP, for the ones that are listening that don't fully quite know much about it, can exercise physiologists, or do they open their own clinics? Do they work by themselves? Is it more common to be, I know you mentioned they work in hospitals, they work alongside physios and chiros. What would you say is kind of the most common thing?
I would say for the vast majority of undergrads coming out, a lot of undergrads would work for different companies, particularly specialising, I think, early stage, maybe musculoskeletal rehabilitation,
Mm.
where you're dealing with a lot of workers' compensation clients or CTA or car accident patients that are coming through. That seems to be where a lot of people actually start. So either on the road as a mobile exercise physiology or as an exercise physiologist or actually in clinic. And then I think a lot of people then start to decide on whether they want to specialize in particular areas or build up their businesses. So initially, I think it's a great way to get in to the profession. Just get in somewhere. It doesn't matter the area that you're in. Just get in, get the experience. You'll be exposed to a lot of different clients and patients coming in,
Mm.
and you can always branch out from there. But initially, that's generally the direction people go is clinic and maybe hospitals. But I think a lot of people go to clinics.
What's the buy-in like in regards to your clients or your patients, in regards to the buy-in to what you're asking them to do? Because obviously it's no secret that, you get people coming in and they want to get better and they've got expectations of getting better. For a lot of people, they may just want a rub down or a crack. When exercise is your main tool,
Yeah.
which takes a little bit more self-responsibility and a little bit more work than just lying down and being cracked or rubbed or have cups put on you or be turned into a beetroot with a scraper, it makes it a little different, doesn't it? So how do you kind of manage that with your patient?
I think it goes back to your assessment on that initial meeting with the client is so important. It's really, really important to take your time in that meeting to listen to that client, but be able to provide insight as to the journey that you want them to take them on with their consent, obviously, right? And it's a great opportunity to say that, you don't just do these exercises for once or twice a week and away, go, job done. Like it's an opportunity for you to actually say, okay, you're here right now, but obviously you want to get back on the powerlifting platform, or you want to change your body composition, or you want to get fit, or you want to be able to pick up your kids and get rid of that lower back pain. We are here. And this is the pathway that we need to follow over the next 6, 8, 10, 12, 24 weeks, or for however long it might be. And your body, your general bodybuilding programs or strength specific programs or CrossFit programs are not typically going to get you there because you're not able for that capacity right now. You
Mm.
might have to explain you're actually at, we need to regress a little bit, build up some endurance and capacity first before we can actually get back to that level where you're at or even supersede where you were. And
Mm.
that takes time. But I have the pathway for you to get there, and I'd usually have a blueprint through periodizing their blocks right up until the 6 or 8 month mark. And when you can provide that overall journey and snapshot from where they are to where you need to be and the checkpoints across along the way, generally a lot of people be like, they realize actually, hold on, like, this guy is quite organized. He has the checkpoints in play. He must know what he's doing.
Mm.
Um, so they'll generally be okay. When do I need to come back and see you?
Yeah, and so obviously for those listening, how would you differentiate what you do to just a standard PT or even a coach? Now, I'm going to assume this has something to do with specificity of your intervention and also assessment, but I would love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, without doubt, there is overlap. The training principles that we have for strength training and things like that, of course, they're going to overlap between the strength and conditioning world or your coaching world and PT world.
Hmm.
Where they would maybe differ slightly is, or a lot, I would say, is I suppose, your in-depth understanding and the foundational knowledge that you have behind biomechanics, the anatomy, and really digging down into the weeds of why and figuring out or trying to figure out the root cause. Whereas a lot of the PT is you learn a particular training methodology, you implement, the person's in pain, but you kind of hope that that will go
Hmm.
away. Whereas I think with us, we really figure out what's going on, why it's going on,
Hmm.
and what is the best training to get that people to where they need to be.
Yep.
So we can use bits and pieces of our training methodologies, but it's not for a lot of clients that I see initially, you can't implement like the normal strength training or hypertrophy blocks that we would typically use for Gen Pop clients that are just well and just want to change their body composition and are injury free.
Hmm.
We need to really think about, okay, what bits and pieces of the toolbox do we need to use to get them to where they need to be?
So, based on my understanding and also in your answer, would you say that you're getting patients that are almost on a different part of the journey than someone that if maybe a physio or a chiro or an osteo would get them, or even, I suppose, a PT or a coach? Do you often get people that have tried everything else and nothing's working?
That's exactly it, Brogan. Yeah. So like at our clinic, so I based myself out of PD Physio in Marrickville and here in Sydney. So the guys, the physios are fantastic there. They all have lifting backgrounds.
Hmm.
But they'll do the initial musculoskeletal diagnosis. And then after the 4 to 6 week treatment with the guys there, then that's where I'll step in to help them on their journey. And you're right in what you're saying there. People are a bit, I think generally, they might have gone to another physio practice or another allied health professional for the first 3 or 4 weeks, but they don't know what to do next. So what do I do? Or
Yep.
it's that pain's coming back, it's not gone away. Or how do I get to my bodybuilding competition, or how do I get to my powerlifting competition to lift heavy again? And they're a little bit lost. There seems to be this big disconnect that I can see at the moment, where there's initial treatment and you're on your own. So where a lot of people now are actually seeking somebody and professionals that give them a blueprint or a plan to say, you're here and this is where you can be. And there's a massive, massive gap there at the moment. It's not being closed only by a couple of people like ourselves out there.
Yeah, that's really interesting what you touched on there, that gap. And I am interested to hear if you've got any thoughts about that, Dr. Stephen, because I know that as a manual therapist or a chiropractor, you've also got an undergrad in exercise science, and that's a big part of what you do in your practice. How do you close that gap?
It's definitely different with each person. Everyone's going to respond to different types of motivation. And so I just try to take my time, figure out the best way to communicate to them.
Hmm.
But the thing I always tell all my patients is I'm going to treat you as aggressively as possible and also see you as little as possible, which means you have to do so much more of the work on your own. And that's the only way we're going to get you better. Otherwise, you're just going to keep coming in and you're not going to get better. I tell that to everyone, but then I add in extra stuff that I say before and after that as well, depending on the personality type, their goals, and how they're coming in. Are they more severe and acute? Are they more severe and chronic? Are they more acute and moderate? It all just depends.
And recently you messaged me saying that you had a patient and all you did was exercise with them. So tell us about when that happens.
Yeah, so I do see maybe 30% of my patient base. It's just exercise based stuff. There's no manual
Wow.
therapy. There's no adjustment, no massage, no nothing. I just do strict exercise based rehab with them, and a lot of times they're kind of confused at first, and then they always have the aha moment. It just depends on when it comes, and they always seem kind of appreciative to it
Hmm.
because, again, I do have lots of different things I can throw at them because I have a pretty big tool belt. And sometimes I just have an idea that maybe this isn't the route to take from the get go, or I already know that they've been seeing XYZ people for XYZ things. And I'm like, well, they've done this, they haven't done this, they've done this, they haven't done this. And so I do the things that they haven't had done that I know that I can provide.
Yeah, and that's an interesting thought because how do you find that, Dr. Luke, in your practice when it comes to you've got people coming in that are expecting a certain type of treatment and you're wanting to implement these exercise interventions and they're not always received as you may want them to be, right?
You know, my first 6 months of being out, that's probably one of the hardest things I've, had to battle, and that's probably challenged me, is trying to find that common ground between what sort of Alan's providing, exercise based, building that long-term plan moving forward, and then what myself and Stephen are dealing with, right? Because me and you, Rogan, have talked about it a lot. Patients' expectations are all built around what they perceive as necessary to the clinic they're coming into, right? So that's things like social media, marketing, everything like that. If you're working in a clinic or your business is putting out, little clips of soft tissue to this part of the region, needling to this part of the region, get these stretches to fix this type of pain. Well, you get patients coming off those types of ads expecting that type of treatment. And I've had patients come in being like, I've seen this video, I want this type of treatment for this type of region. Already you're on the back foot. It's hard to just turn around and say, well, no, we're not going to do that, because they're just not going to be a compliant patient. They're not going to come back. So you've got to find ways to weed in what you think is necessary and is going to be helpful, but also to the point where they feel like they're being like addressed and heard, if that makes sense. Yeah.
Well, it definitely makes sense. And what we've just organically uncovered here in our conversation is that spectrum of rehabilitation between manual therapy and exercise. And what exercise physiologists do really, really brilliantly is, and you hit the nail on the head, Alan, is they provide a blueprint, right? So the assessment and the intervention is very specific to what they need. And that's where it differentiates from just PTs. And then that's also where it differentiates from manual therapists that don't offer that. And then you get certain manual therapists or clinicians or practitioners like Stephen and Luke that will bring the exercise in. So for those that are listening, we're talking about the spectrum of rehab, where you've got people that come off the street and they're expecting a treatment based on the advertising, marketing, and content that you're putting out there. How are you putting yourself out there, right? So as an exercise physiologist, the things that you put on your page, the way you put yourself out there, Alan, is going to kind of have a huge part to play when someone knocks on your door and wants to come in and see you and be treated by you. They're not going to expect you to crack them like a glow stick and hit the flying seven, which they may expect from a manual therapist or a chiropractor. So really where I'm going with this for you, Alan, the question here is that comes down to communication, in my opinion, and it comes down to how you present yourself, how you communicate about yourself, how you communicate to the patient. Do you ever get any pushback that you don't provide hands-on?
I actually have to say I haven't actually encountered any pushback at all. Like I have been asked, do I provide any hands-on manual therapy, and I've just said no, I don't, because I do believe it has its place, but for a person say for a particular person in front of me, I don't think it warrants it at that time. I'll just say, in order for you to get to where you need to be, you're actually beyond that point now. We need to get those weak points addressed, and for you to incorporate exercise, strength training to get you back to where you want to be, or even further. But yeah, no, I've never had any pushback. And if somebody was to push back or say, no, like I really want that treatment, like we're fortunate enough that we do have that option in the clinic that I would refer on.
Yep. Yeah, that's just very interesting. I think obviously in your case, the fact that you're an exercise physiologist and how you're presenting yourself and how you're kind of advertising yourself is very clear, so you're not getting people coming in and being confused. But naturally, if you're a chiropractor, obviously naturally people are going to come in looking for a certain type of treatment, and then you're trying to say, hey, I understand you want to have hands-on, but I also want to implement some exercise because I feel like this is going to help you long term. And then that's where you're getting some of that.
Like I want clients coming through the door, and I want them to come in, and I want them to have that little bit of a aware or shock factor in the first couple of sessions, or even couple of months, where they're learning all the time, and they know exactly what good and bad movement feels and looks like. And I want them to be able to take that information, the knowledge and the tools that I share with them, to take with them forever. I don't expect them to be with me forever. But if they can just upskill themselves to a point where they're comfortable, they're moving well, they're happy, they're able to do what they want to do, perform on the platform or whatever it might be, fantastic. That's exactly what I want.
So really, I'm getting some aspects of neurohab coming through there in what you're saying in terms of building up someone's functional capacity via interventions of training and magnitude of load so that they're able to do what they want day to day, right? Yeah. And that's very much a David Johnson type philosophy. I know you've done that education. How do you implement that type of education, the neurohab, Dr. David Johnson specific type stuff into your treatments?
Yeah, it's amazing, how much of these things that you do. So Dr. John's fantastic neurosurgeon up in Brizzy, absolute animal in the gym to go. I've trained with him and I've paid the price for that a couple of times, but big shout out to him. But the principles that he teaches in the NeuroHab program is applicable to anything in terms of training and rehab. So it is about quality, proficient movement and nailing the basics before you add the layers of more complex movements. If you haven't got the basics or you haven't got the foundations, you can't build anything else. So it's about really trying to nail those basics first. The hip hinge, the squat fundamentals, nice progressive overhead movements with clean pressing above head, and a lot of core endurance. So building up the endurance and the capacity to move and to allow you to lift heavier will ensure that you're lifting for longer and safer as well. It's about creating that endurance and stability. So it carries the whole way through my programming, yeah, for sure.
So when we talk about the different interventions and the different kind of roles that an EP would play versus a DC or a physio, et cetera, how do you approach your patient's pain when they come in and they're dealing with an issue and they're in quite a bit of pain? For many manual therapists, they will rely on the manual therapy as a means of modulating pain in the interim while they bring the exercise in. For someone like yourself, do you have certain things that you do that you know are really good for pain, like mobilizations, various types of stretching? There's various things, self-administered types of exercises you could prescribe or go through with your patient that may help with their pain. Are you thinking about that as well as everything else, or do you let the pain thing kind of be dealt with either a team of people or pharmaceutical intervention, et cetera, et cetera? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. Yeah, I don't think it depends. Again, I know we say it depends a lot, right? But it does. Context is key, like Luke mentioned earlier on. If a person's in that acute stage where pain levels are really, really high, you got to kind of pare things back, and then it comes back down to your assessment again. So I'll try and do certain things or tests that might provoke the pain so I know what's going on, and then try and find those key movement patterns then, or things that we can do that to bypass that, but make sure that we're not losing any kind of movements or we're being sedentary, which again could add to the problem. So I suppose a little bit McGill comes in there a little bit as well, see, and Mackenzie, where their principles creep in, where you're trying to find those little nuggets that you can use to get that person through the initial stages. If I need to refer on to one of the physios for a more in-depth look or diagnosis, I'll do that for sure. But everything comes back to the assessment again, and I'll go from there. So I'll figure out like what can I do from an exercise intervention side all of the time? What exercises can I not use for this person right now? And I'll usually have a chat with some of the physios downstairs and say, this client presented with this, and we'll have a little brainstorm, and I'll just ask. I'll ask the guys, I'm thinking of this as an exercise intervention. How do you think that would fit in the first 4 to 6 weeks or this initial acute phase for this person? And it'll either be yes or no to a certain exercise, or it's definitely a collaborative approach if the person's pain severe. I think the context is very, very, very important. But yeah, like when you need to reach out and ask people for help, by all means do. I mean, I've sent you a few messages as well going, Brogan.
Yeah. Same with me. You're right. Being able to collaborate, it's actually very, very helpful having a community that spans across internationally, because you can reach out and there's just so many specialists in our circle of community that you can reach out to and ask questions, especially with things that pertain to a specific body part. Do you have anything that you enjoy treating the most, or do you have something that you just happen to treat more just happen to see a lot of anyway, like lower back, shoulder, knee? Like what's your jam?
My jam, there's a few jams. I
Okay.
think probably two would be lower back as number one, and the second area would be knee, and probably followed thirdly would be, I'd say, shoulder would be the third area. Yeah, but definitely lower back and knee are the two areas that seem to be flavor of the years.
Lower back and knee. What do you see the most of, Luke?
We have physios in our clinic as well.
Yeah.
But traditionally, chiro speaking, we see the lower back, probably like around the shoulder neck region. I do enjoy getting cases changing out that come in with knees and things like that. But
Yeah.
traditionally speaking, probably lower back, mate, the most, man.
I'm amazed at, like, just, being 2.5 years out now from uni, and like the amount of lower back cases that I've come across. I was not expecting that when I left uni. I was thinking, okay, cool. Like, I mean, I wonder what we might get. And then all of a sudden I was getting so many lower back referrals with the last company I was working with.
Yeah.
And radiculopathy symptoms, quite severe presentation of symptoms. And I just thought to myself, I don't know whether I'm on the right track here or not with these clients. I think I am. I've done some of Andrew Locke's courses, and I was kind of thinking, I think I am. But I know this puzzle that I'm missing. Who can I contact? And that's where Dr. Johnson came in, and I was lucky enough then, obviously, for them to point me in your direction as well. Lucky for me, maybe not for you. But,
You've had some hard ones, that's for sure. And that's the thing. We were talking about this yesterday, being like, you become a detective of sorts. When you are seeing people who are coming in and they have very acute injuries and you're just trying to kind of manage them, you're kind of playing a different role opposed to potentially what we're doing as exercise physiologists, where, like you said, there's a blueprint, there's a plan. You've got time to back away from the person, and you've got time to go back to the drawing board. You've got time to ask for help. You've got time to go through and really think about what it potentially could be. And you become a detective of sorts because you're really trying to figure out what is, like, you hit the nail on the head. And once again, you're trying to find the root cause of what's going on. And sometimes it can be just so complicated. And we know it's complicated because we've gotten to a point where many, many people in the medical industry are very happy to just throw 90% of lower back issues into the abyss of non-specific back pain. As we know, it's almost gotten too complicated that it's become non-specific for many people because they're overwhelmed. They're overwhelmed by the variables, the potential variables, and they're overwhelmed by the details and what it could be. When you get a hard patient or when you've got a hard case, what do you do? What is your point of call? What is your first thing that you do when you've got a real tough lower back case?
Assessment number one. I have different protocols for different parts of the body. So, and I have my lumbar and lower back assessment. So I obviously test like flexion tolerance, extension tolerance, lateral flexion. I'll do a slump if needed. I'll obviously have a little look at their hip flexor mobility as well. Hip range, you have to assess the hips. You cannot leave the hips out. And I'll go down usually as far as the ankles as well, because I will look at ankle mobility. I'll do the knee to wall, and I'll also test then proprioceptive skills as well. So how good is their balance? What's their foot posture like? Are we looking at fallen or arches here? I'll get the person walking up and down as well. And generally from the time I see them when they come in, I know a couple of your guests have mentioned it before, like Andrew, like it really does start when they come through the door in the clinic. So like what's the shoulder alignment like? What's the hip alignment? What's the foot doing? And as soon as they come in and they sit down, we have a little chat about symptoms, whatever it might be, then I'll get them to walk with their shoes off, and then it starts from the ground up, and that's really my approach. And I'll do some of the provocation tests. I'll find out the movement patterns that are giving them the most hassle, and get a better understanding of what was maybe the mechanism of injury at the time, or is there subsequent build-up of history there that's contributed to this over a number of years. I'll try and take everything into account. And then from there, then I'll just go in, I'll study, and I'll have a think about more in depth around, okay, what's suited to this person right now. And it all stems from that initial assessment. And I would definitely spend at least an hour in that first assessment with the client. I think it's really, really important, especially with the lower back cases, because it's a complex area. I don't think I've ever had one straightforward case. It's not straightforward, like, when you have somebody. I get a lot of the cases where clients have been in pain for 2, 3, 4, 5 years, have spent thousands of dollars on interventions, and they're not much better.
I get those people too. I get people that come to me, and you really have to be careful how you begin to perceive certain professions, because you have to be self-aware enough and objective enough to understand the type of people you're seeing, because it's very easy to be on either side of the equation and be like, oh, well, the people that see manual therapists, they're stuffing up. And then they're being like, oh, well, the exercise people doesn't do anything. Because I'm seeing people that are constantly saying to me, my chiropractor just smashed me and just side postured me and I have a herniated disc and it got worse. Or my physio just told me to do flexion and they just loaded me into Jefferson's for a herniated disc. And this is what I hear. This is actually what I hear. I have to remind myself, be objective and self-aware enough to be like, I know where I'm sitting in the spectrum of rehab. There's certain parts that I'm not seeing, and there's certain people that I'm seeing, and that's going to change my perception. I was recently talking to a strength coach, and we were discussing, was it strength? Yeah, no, we were discussing warming up in general. And he was saying, as a strength coach, just doing the movement, just warming up through the movement, starting with the bar, starting light, building their way up is the best thing, and there's no need to be stuffing around doing warm-ups. And I shared that opinion when I was a strength coach, because from my opinion, all the physios and the chiros and all these people were just wasting time getting you to roll around and do rollers and stretches and all this crap. And I thought it was a waste of time. And you had people like Mike O'Hearn, famous bodybuilders and powerlifters, being like, just warm up through the movement. Now that I'm on the other edge, a decade later, and I'm in the space of rehab now, I couldn't disagree even more. I mean, it'd be very, very, very unusual if I told someone to not do anything but the movement to warm up. But it's only because I'm seeing different people. So as a strength coach, I was just seeing healthy people mostly, and they could get away with that for then in that time. Now I'm seeing people that can't get away with it, so it seems obscene. But I'm just in a different perspective.
You're right, and like I'll always do that as well. Even my own training as well. Andrew talks about the theory behind potentiation and things like that. I think that's so important before you get in under the bar.
Yep.
Your body just feels ready. I think when you step up to the platform to lift a bit of weight, you're good to go. And without that, I know all these other guys say that's it might be a little bit rubbish, but they're also full time. A lot of these guys, athletes that have probably built up those movement patterns that allow for that. They have the capacity, whereas most of the guys that we see they actually don't. So they need to warm up.
Absolutely, it can be pretty provocative, for a lot of people, especially that we deal with, just to go straight into a movement.
Just a question on that, Alan.
Yeah.
So majority of your patients, are they, like, what would you say would be the percentage split of, so you're obviously seeing people that they come in for physio first, they spend 4 to 6 weeks with them, maybe trying to get them out of acute pain, and then they get fed onto you, versus patients walking in through the door and coming straight to you?
Yeah.
Like, what would you say?
At this moment, it's probably 50-50.
Oh, okay, sweet, yeah.
Yeah. So the guys are being really good. The physios are being great and helping me grow the business there this year and referring some clients on where maybe the exercise knowledge and programming knowledge is not there, and that person or those clients want to get back to lifting and lifting heavy, which has been great. But then there's been other clients that have just come in and they're starting from fresh. So we've had to just go from that assessment stage, haven't really had any plan in the past or haven't really exercised much but want to, and are carrying a couple of injuries and want to get there. But a lot of the lower back clients that I've seen this year, they've just seen some of our material on social media and things like that, and they've come in and we've had to go from ground zero right up to a good 6-month planning phase of training for them. Yeah.
Well, what sort of interventions do you provide to get someone, like, to modulate pain from the first visit, essentially? So if they've obviously come through the physio for the first 4 to 6 weeks, you're probably not going to have to bother with that too much, right? You sort of build them through a plan moving forward, versus if they come straight through the door, holding their sort of back, then you almost have to change your approach from the first visit.
A couple of things I noticed with clients, and sometimes it goes back to basics as well with some of the things that we've learned maybe a little bit later in our lifting careers, like things like bracing and creating that intra-abdominal pressure. I think it's one of the most underrated or undervalued tools that we have. Like, I have had clients come in that don't brace, but they're flexion intolerant, or when they're bending forward, they're in a lot of pain. Tell them to brace, or teach them how to brace, or put them on the ground if it allows, and actually get them to brace properly with like a light kettlebell across their stomach and create that intra-abdominal pressure and get them to hold it. Now transfer that person to their feet and repeat the movement, and it feels better. you already know you're on the right track, but there's obviously a weakness there when it comes to core endurance. So then I'll start thinking about, okay, what what do I need to do here to build this up for the person? So it's maybe practice abdominal bracing, but what directions are they weak in? So is it the sagittal plane or is it the frontal plane? More often than not, it's frontal. A
Mhm.
lot of people can't hold a side plank for more than maybe 15, 20 seconds. So what I'll generally do then is, for example, for that type of client, I'll try and build their tolerance up to over a minute in the side plank, and I'll go from there. And after that, then I'll sprinkle in some proprioceptive work. Maybe it's some work with just a dowel stick across the back with some nice weighted kettlebells to give some of the oscillation type work. Get some of the multifidus nice and strong as well. And I'll incorporate some of that stuff across the training program, across the months and weeks, and try and progress it that way. Yeah, but sometimes it's just the basic stuff first, and then I'll just start to sprinkle in
Plus,
other things
yeah.
along the way. Yeah, and I never tend to leave out some of the basic movement patterns or hip hinges, hip flexion extension, that type of thing. Like I'll get them to practice even with just a weight plate. If holding a kettlebell is too much out in front of the body, usually if you just hold like a 5 kilo weight plate close to the chest, keep reinforcing the hip hinge patterns, for example, might be something else with a good brace. And a lot of the time they'll say, that's better, I'm moving better. And I'm always watching, like, how are they doing it? Are they rocking from their toes to their heels? Are they getting enough hip shift back toward the wall in terms of an RDL? Just little things like that. I'll fix and tweak, and then when they're ready, I'll start to add in some of the more complicated compound moves.
Yeah, it's reactive in the sense that the beauty of it is that you're not just seeing somebody for 15 minutes rack and crack or massage and sitting them. And so the program's very reactive in the sense that you do the initial assessment, but the assessment never really stops. And the intervention becomes the assessment because you're looking for feedback. And that's exactly what you just said then. And I've found that to be potentially one of the most beneficial ways of modulating pain is being able to prescribe self-administered movements or being able to pretty much locate what's causing the issue. And you hit the nail on the head when you said if someone's got an instability, right, or if someone's got a flexion intolerance or someone, whatever, you've assessed them and you've figured out what's causing it. Just because you've figured out in the clinic doesn't mean you figured it out what's causing it in their day-to-day. So it's
Yeah,
being able to figure out why is it happening in the day-to-day. So it's like, okay, well, when I get out of bed or when I get into the car, and this is very real. I remember when I first bought my BMW, it was so low and the brake was a little bit higher, which means that I had to keep my left foot hiked up at all times. I've got a short femur. I broke my femur when I was 5. And so I've always had issues with that leg. But from buying that car, it got exponentially bad. And so you do have to ask these questions. And when I asked you before, like, how do you deal with complicated cases? You said go back to the assessment. Absolutely right. And for me, it's go back to the history and the wise words of Dr. House. I learned that one from him. But yeah, it's like always go back to the history. But I'm in the history, I'm asking these questions, I'm probing, I'm asking about day to day, because when I get my clinical input or my clinical answers, I'm then trying to cross relate that over to the history. I don't have to sit there and be quiet. I can ask the person, I can interact with them the whole way through the session, the whole way through the programming, week 1, week 2, week 3, week 6, week 12, however long I'm working with them. That's the beauty of this style of treatment, right? I don't have to just see them for a little bit, get as much information, and never talk to them again. I've definitely found that using the interventions as part of the assessment, it never stops. And if you get something wrong, it's actually okay. You try the next thing, Like the idea is that you're going to get something perfect first time every time is pretty unlikely.
yeah,
And if someone comes in and there are just basic checklist things that we're going to do, like you just mentioned, you're going to check their intolerances, you're going to check for provocative movements, you're going to check for day-to-day stuff, you're going to do basic instability checking, shear forces, flexion under load, compression load, dynamic load, cyclic load, all this stuff is you're going to check. And then you can look at that and say, okay, what are you doing in your day to day? And they go, oh, well, every morning I do this, or on Tuesdays I bring in the groceries, or this or that, and you start to make connections. And so by removing the provocative movements, the pain drops anyway. To jump on your question, Luke, that's the biggest thing I've found for me is removing provocative movements in their day to day life.
you brought up a great point there as well, Brogan, around like, but what else are people doing outside of your sessions for the rest of the day for those 12, 13, 14 hours, right?
Yeah.
Because that plays a huge part too, because obviously if the person's sedentary, your treatment's going to take a lot longer, and you have to you have to give and provide that honesty and feedback in the sessions with clients, that if unfortunately, for example, like that's their role in terms of their work, that they're going to have to put the extra bit of effort in to get the results. Otherwise, it's going to take longer because you can't. Your 20 or 30 minute intervention that they might be able to do at home, it's not going to undo 13, 14 hours of being quite sedentary and sitting at a desk. So you have to make the extra effort to move and to actually do it. And if they don't do the work, they're not going to get the results. And that's what I see time and time again. If clients just take the program, maybe do it once or twice a week, it's just simply not enough. Like it needs to be done every single day, twice a day, as Mr. Locke would say,
Yeah.
for at least 3 to 4 months, if not for the rest of your life.
It's your life.
Like depending on how severe your symptoms are, but it is true, and I've seen it. I've done it myself. I've been injured. I've been in that boat where, I injured my own back and a deadlift. Forgot I was doing a 1 1/4 and tried to recover halfway through the rep and gave a little tweak down to the lower back. But I worked twice a day, 3 times a day to try and get back to lifting. I didn't give it up and sit in my backside for 4 to 6 weeks. I kept moving. I kept doing the exercises every single day. Paired it right back to the McKenzie protocol initially and peppered in the movements. But when you get the results that people put the effort in, but you need to work at it. Yeah, it doesn't come straight away. It doesn't come straight away. It takes time. And I've said that to people as well, especially in consultations. Stick with the plan. Give it a bit of time. Pull things back. Get off your kind of bodybuilding or pure strength program for now, and just allow time to do its thing, and we'll keep working on the other weaknesses that need to be addressed.
Yeah, because I often try to steelman my own perspectives, right? Because I don't want to be someone that is just easily swayed by what I see on social media or other people's opinions. So when I think about my own opinions or I think about my own research or things like that, I try to steelman them. And one of the big things I've heard from others when they are trying to strawman our approach is that we say strength fixes everything. And they say, look, how can that be? And I often say to people, well, that's not necessarily true. My working model of strength, which is muscular contraction, endurance, and then obviously the important thing, which many people don't fully understand, would be skill. People understand, they go, oh, you're just going to get stronger. But it's like, no, back to the context thing. Strength within context is skill. And when you start to understand that piece, it makes so much more sense, because when you've got an injury to a soft tissue, you're going to have inherent instability by the nature of the damage of the tissue. And when you're trying to create stability in a system that is lacking stability, there are many ways to do it. And just getting somebody to do strength training in isolation is not the answer. It's actually building coordination, control, and skill through strength and being able to progress people or regress them appropriately.
I've had a couple of powerlifters this year come and they're injured, all right. They've said, okay, I'm already strong, but what's missing in my toolbox?
Yeah.
And once you kind of identify some of those weakness areas and then add it to what they're already good at, the results are fast. They're able to just get back to where they want to be and get back squatting heavy and everything. But everything is moving just really, really well. And you'll get a lot of positive feedback quickly.
Are there any key things about how you treat now that have changed since you graduated? I'm assuming there's a lot, but any real major ones that you could think of?
I think the major one that I've tried to get better and better at is, I know I've harped on about quite a bit, but it is the assessment. And I've seen like how people do it. Like I've seen through the seminars how Dr. Locke does it and Dr. Johnson does it. We've had discussions about it. I've had a look at, I know we've discussed how Dr. Aaron Horschig there, Squat University, also does it as well. And I've taken bits and pieces and systemized that. Plus my previous company, MVT Rehab, I have to give them a bit of a shout out. They were brilliant as well, great support. But they had a really good assessment protocol for each and every part, lower limb, upper limb. And I learned a lot there as well. So I merged a lot of them and systemized a lot of it into a template for my little business that I have. And it's working really, really well. So I have to say that like definitely the assessment, I've tried to hone the skills in on that. I've definitely doubled down on really digging deep into the why and the cause, and just ask people lots and lots of questions over the last 2.5 years. But yeah, I think that as well. Another area I think I brushed up on quite a lot since 2017, starting out as a PT, is program writing.
Hmm.
Like getting into the weeds around strength training and program writing, periodization, and how can that be used and the principles used in rehabilitation. Not just here's your 2, 3, 4 exercises, but here's the journey. Here's what we're going to do in phase 1. This is phase 2. This is phase 3, phase 4 of your training. Like literally periodize someone's 6, 8, 10, 12 month.
Yeah, the beauty of that is you get this thing called phase potentiation, where obviously you're able to program one phase to support another phase. And the overall effect is that people get more out of it. And I've found very much so that transitioning people from rehab into just their normal training has been a real hard piece for me. So like when people want to go back to training, they're nervous or anxious that they're going to do something wrong again. So many of my clients want me to write them programs, and for a few of them, I've stayed on and I've just been a strength coach. I have to put a different hat on. I have to put like a strength coach hat on now, and I did that for many years, so I'm very confident. I've got all the paperwork, I've got the programs, I've got everything sussed. But it's been really interesting taking people. I haven't just been taking people from absolute ground zero, can't play with their kids, can't get off the toilet, to all the way through to deadlifting and squatting over 200 kgs and just being a beast. You know, like doing that is been a little bit different for me, because like in my mind, I'm like, cool, I'm just going to get them back to like baseline, and then I'm going to refer them on to someone else. But they're like kind of nervous about me sending them to someone else. So I'm like, okay, I'll do some strength coach stuff with you, and then they love it and they want to stay on, and then I don't have like I've almost got too, I don't have enough time to do it. So I'm like trying to transition them to someone else. And I've got friends, shout out to, you know, Bryn, he's he's a fantastic strength coach. So I've got people that I can send them to or refer to, or I've referred people to Mofo before. And, you know, there's people around that you can refer to, but it's a really cool, I'm sure you've been able to experience that too, right? Not just taking someone from injured to baseline, but taking them from baseline to being the best they've ever been.
It's actually an area that like I'm still perfecting and getting and better at it, and it's where I want my business to kind of go over the next couple of years. Is to, like we mentioned earlier on, it's about identifying that gap. You know, the gap that exists about post initial treatment, and then where do I go from here? And it's trying to help people realize, well, here's the blueprint. Here's what we can do to get you there, and that's, I think, where my passion lies, is to get people from that stage A or even B all the way to the finish line of where they want to be.
Yeah,
And
cool.
that's the awesome part. And one one course that I did actually as well over the last 12 months was by a Dr. Tony Battagli, who's based here in Australia. He was in Sydney. I think he's moved up the coast now. But Tony does an advanced program mastery course, and a lot of his clients are physique athletes, strength athletes, and but the guy's an unbelievable athlete himself. His VO2 max is through the roof. Like his wattage output on a bike, it's short of Olympic level. It's nuts. Like how that man can maintain the power on the bike, I don't know. But anyway, he is an absolute gentleman, but he's fantastic at divulging the technical scientific information around strength training into easily digestible information and how to apply that across a person's journey. So I did his course on advanced programming, and the way he structures his periodized plans for clients is beautiful. And he talks about how the Russians actually designed these general preparatory phases for their athletes, and they could see that it mitigated injury risk and improved performance time and time and time again. So the readings behind it are fantastic. So when I was going through this course, I was thinking, we got to get these clients from the early stage rehabilitation into general preparatory phase. And then Tony then talked about designing a specific preparatory phase. So then we're adding in certain overload techniques to build up that muscular capacity and endurance. And only then when, say, for example, his athletes can withstand that level of training, are they then ready for the block periodization model, which will be a strength block first, followed by 2 bouts of hypertrophy, if they want to go down that road, if that was their goal.
Yeah.
So then I thought, how can I use all of this fantastic information that's out there that was created long way, early in the early 1930s, 40s, 50s from the Russians. How can we use that model and some of that into what we do as exercise physiologists, physios, chiros? So we can use that early stage GPP or general prep phase, get people specifically ready for what they want to be. So maybe it's powerlifting or just to get bigger muscles, whatever it might be,
Mm.
and we can push them on that journey. So that framework now is what I've adopted to try and help people to get them from the early acute pain phase all the way up to where they want to be.
Mm. Yeah, because the thing is that obviously the patient doesn't quite they're not skilled in or educated necessarily in this, and really it's our job to understand how we're driving adaptation, and it's their job to pick their goal, but it's our job to get it done. And really the way we use the intervention or the programming or the periodization, undulating, conjugate, daily undulating, DUP, linear progression, linear periodization, whatever you're using, it's really just a means to an end to push them towards a certain type of adaptation. And that certain type of adaptation is their goals. And so what you're talking about is general, physical preparedness, creating a base, creating a hypertrophy base, creating a strength base, going from what would be non-specific and working your way up to specific. All these types of things are just, they've been around for so long, these principles, and there's so many legends in the field when it comes to strength science. I love it. I absolutely love it because there's really a way to do it properly. And there's most people will go 5x5, whatever, and they put very little thought into program potentiation, phase potentiation, but they also put very little thought into SRA, stimulus recovery adaptation. And sometimes I'll get a text from a patient or a client. They kind of change, right? So as they go out of rehab, they move into being more of a client, and they'll message me and they'll go, "Is this meant to be this like heavy or this light?" Or they'll ask me a question because the program seems somewhat random to them, and I'll be like, yeah, absolutely, that's meant to be there, because what they can't see is that every lift is moving on a stimulus recovery adaptation cycle, and as one may go up, another one may go down. What is the end goal? The end goal is to improve performance, right, and get them to their goal, but it's to keep them recovering, because if you allow them to recover appropriately, you're going to long-term avoid injuries. If you know how to program somebody and you know them well, you know on which day that they should be performing well. And that's how the program works.
Like one of my clients now at the moment, she's gone really, really well. She came in a couple of months ago with cervical pain, a lot of tightness in the traps and things like that. And it's gone back 6.5 months ago actually now. So I had a chat with her and I just said, look, what's your training history? What's been going on? There was no real conclusive diagnosis as to the cause of, the neck pain. Very, I suppose, when you look at the posture, maybe, and there was a couple of things there, a little bit of kyphosis, but nothing too crazy. Movement patterns, then I could see overhead. There was a little bit of scap dyskinesia going on there, but it's not too uncommon amongst most people nowadays. But we sprinkled in, we did the general preparatory phases, moved into a specific phase, and I said, like, I want to run a strength block with you in maybe 5-6 months time. And like she's like, I don't think I could get there. Like, I don't. Yeah, I don't. I was like, trust me, right? Let's have a go. Let's have a crack. We'll do all this good fun stuff first. We build up the endurance, and then we're in the middle now of our second strength block, and she's gone so well. I mean, we started with 40 kilos on the trap bar. We tested her strength there just a few weeks ago. She's up to 82 and a half.
Oh,
And, like, just the sheer delight and happiness, you can see it on the client's face, and she's moving well. Stability is getting better and better, and the pain is gone. There's no pain no more in the neck. Everything's moving well. And we've just carried certain aspects of the early general prep program into the strength block as well. And it's going well. You can't beat it. It's a great feeling.
as we kind of close, what's one or two things you would say to somebody that has just, the new grad, the person that's just graduated from physio or EP or chiro or osteo, or they've just finished doing their training, they've got a massive student loan? What is your advice for that person?
I think the advice would be reach out to other EPs in the field. I know it sounds very cliche, but do reach out to EPs in the field, reach out to other allied health professionals, chiros, physios, and ask questions. Get in there, get into the weeds. Take whatever cases are coming your way. You're fresh out of uni, and really, uni as we know now, like it obviously lays the foundation, gives you a great level of knowledge, but you cannot be getting somebody coming through the door with something that you're not expecting at all. And the more variation that comes through the door, the better, because you learn to actually, you learn fast on the job. But never stop asking questions. I would say also do courses. So a couple of courses I would highly recommend would be definitely Andrew Locke's lower lumbar rehabilitation course, Dr. Johnson's Neurorehab. I also have Dr. Tony Battaji for advanced programming as well. Sebastian Oreb, the Australian strength coach, has got some great courses as well. So, reach out to these people and get knowledgeable. And what I would also say for, I suppose, a lot of graduates that are coming out, you have to lift yourself.
Yes.
Please, please, please.
Yes.
Exercise. I used to be blown away when I was at university with the amount of students in our cohort that didn't exercise, but yet we're in an allied health profession. It just blows my mind. You need to exercise to practice what you preach in this field, and you need to actually train and train hard and yourself, and you need to know what it feels like to take a muscle to failure, and you need to know what it feels like to have load on your back safely. And you also need to know what it feels like to do an absolute lung buster of an aerobic session. There's no one training methodology that fixes all, but when you combine them all together, it's so powerful. But you need to experience it as a practitioner as well, and don't be afraid to experience it. Just jump in. And
okay, so we have a lot of people that listen, a lot of different practitioners and clinicians. For the person that is listening that is saying like, hell yeah, I get it, it makes sense, I want to start moving more, I want to be a clinician that just doesn't just talk the talk, I want to walk the walk, I want to start training, I want to do exercise, but it's just something I've never done, it's just something I don't know. Obviously, you've given some great educational options there, but what would you say to that person in terms of where the hell do they start if they don't know where to start when it comes to exercise?
I think, like, if you're working in a clinic and at a physio clinic or a chiro clinic, there's a good chance that probably one of your colleagues is probably big into it, and they're probably affiliated with a local club or a gym or a group of people. So tag along and go. Don't be afraid to ask them. The other thing is to get onto Dr. Google and have a look through there and find your local club and go along and just bite the bullet. There was a talk there by one of my business mentors recently, and we had a guest speaker on called Gareth Timmins, who's an ex-British Navy Royal Marine Green Beret. And these guys are the highest level trained guys. And what he said was, on one of his recent talks, kind of resonated with me, is it's great that you get calluses on your hands, but also get calluses on the mind. So push yourself to do the hard things and build up your resilience. And he said, when the negative self-talk comes in to say you can't do it, he said that's when you should do it. Push yourself.
Yeah.
So go and find the local gym, try CrossFit, try strength program, maybe even sign yourself up for a bodybuilding photo shoot or something like that. Put yourself through the paces, because all the top guys do. You do it. Stephen does it. Luke does it. You've got Dr. Mike Israel on there from Renaissance Periodization. He puts himself through the bodybuilding programs. You've got obviously the Australian strength coach. The guys that they're all walking the walk, but don't be afraid. Everyone has to start somewhere, but just jump in and you learn. That's the fun part of it. It has a compounded effect over the years, and it just should become part of your lifestyle for sure.
Do you have any questions, lads, before we close up?
No, all good, man.
No questions at the moment. Thank you so much, Alan.
No problem. I hope it was helpful and not full of waffle.
No, it was great.
There's just so much good stuff there. People that are listening, go back, listen to it again, take some notes, and would love to have you back at some point, obviously. We'll see you on the Instagram. What's your handle for those that want to follow you?
Alan English _EP. You'll find me on Instagram there.
Give him a follow. You'll learn a lot. Thanks for coming on, man. I really appreciate it.
Thanks so much, guys. Great to be on and keep up the good work, everyone.